Yeah, welcome to the first kind of cross-team, cross-stage collab. This is meant to be just a place to ask questions, share updates, whatever you want to make it, so that everybody's in the know of all the different things going on. Eugenia, you have the first question on the agenda.
Yes, I wanted to say first, maybe this is a bit specific. We wanted to do it async, but I thought that because it's going to be every team in the meeting, maybe there was something that we can start here in the meeting and then move to an issue. This is regarding the way we check permissions currently for work items types. And the question, I think this was discussed before, but I couldn't find an issue with the discussion. So to summarize, the question is, could we consider enabling epics in a free tier if those epics are technically very basic? They don't have widgets that, for example, adding children. That would mean no roll-up either. Whatever is in essence, it would become an issue. That's basically how I see it. Which we could say there would be arguments against it, like why would you have an epic if you can have an issue? They would be the same without the extra features. The reason to suggest this is how it would be beneficial in the backend, the way we check permissions. If we check per type, if we start to introducing checks per type, this means that we cannot freely list work items without checking which type of work item this is, and should we add an extra check, in this case, if the license is available. So if we move that check to a widget, it's different because widgets are always depending on the type. So we already checking what type of work item it is. So that's a summary. If we don't want to discuss this,
No,
maybe.
I think it's a good discussion. So Gabe, just because you came in right at in the middle of the question is, could we consider putting the license check on widgets rather than work item types and allow epics to be available at the free level, so available at all levels, and then restrict what you can do with it from a widget perspective? Before I answer that, Kushal, do you wanna verbalize your comment?
Yeah. So, speaking of permission checks, Eugenia, do you think that us not doing widget-based checks and rather relying on types is also a contributing factor to why less performance is slow?
Not so far. I think we're not checking this specifically. This is something that comes out for me when I'm starting to work on project epics, and mostly the unified listing. So when you go to work items as a list, we're going to start using the work items finder for it. And that means that we can not just return all work items by the filters. We also need to check
Okay.
which type it is and hide it if the epics is not available.
Okay.
For the group levels, we're still using the old query and only returning epics. So we're already doing that filtering. But once we start unifying the list, this is going to be, performance impact.
Okay. Because then if we are gaining performance by moving checks to the license to the widgets, then that would be in itself a big incentive to do so. And it isn't like we aren't doing it already. I mean, we do have widget-based license checks on legacy issuables too, where wait is only available if you're on premium. So if there is already a precedence, I don't see why we shouldn't do it. However, definitely it would be a product input on whether it would be okay to allow creating epic types without all the widgets that make it an epic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be an epic just by name, but it wouldn't have the characteristic of an epic. So that's the thing that is a big question. Obviously, from the technical perspective, it will be an improvement. From the product perspective, is what we're trying to figure out.
I think the behavior that is in premium is the levels of basically work item hierarchy you can have, right? So it's not necessarily the widgets, it's the fact that you can have up to 3 levels in premium. And you have things that you can create at the group, parents you can create within the group. I think in terms of putting license checks on widgets, that's great. That makes sense because then you have the ability to basically tier behaviors instead of types. But at the same time, like I don't know if it makes sense to have epics in free unless then we're gonna have to add some extra logic to say like you can only have 2 levels of parent and a child, and an epic and an issue or an issue and a task, which then kind of is weird from a user expectations perspective, I think. Long term and free, we're not going to allow configurable work item types. So just like the default types that are always going to be in free we're going to be issue and task, and they won't be able to customize those or customize status or do anything, right? So I don't know where it's best to put the license check for that.
Right, but this still, so this is where the question comes in, right? We're talking about getting epics into projects, but then epics into projects only at EE level. So we're basically tying epic type per se to the EE license check, because otherwise there is no way to say that yes, you can have epics, but only if it's you can have epics in projects, but only if it's EE, right? That's what I'm hearing at least.
Yes.
Or otherwise, like we need to allow epics into free so that they can go to projects. We can start restricting it at the group level. So free does not have access to any work item types, for instance, at the group level, which makes sense. But then do we leave it as you can have all of this basically work item types at the project level, but you can only link them together 2 levels deep. So you can either have epic issue but no task, or you can have issue task but not an epic parent. Or do we allow us like we need to define what we want to allow at the free level, basically, given that we will expose basically all the current default types or system types at the project level, right? So yeah, we need to think it through and understand how we want to present that to the free user so that it does make sense and it also doesn't remove capabilities basically from premium or have them downgrade, right? Just because we've added extra functionality and so on. So that's basically our question. From engineering perspective, that will be much better to not tie the checks to a type, especially as we go into custom work item types, then it will be even more difficult to know which one is which. And that question with the custom types goes into the scenario where someone was on a paid license but then downgraded to free, for instance, right? So that's basically the case where we will encounter this, where they can have, you can be on free, but your database still already has basically the custom types in there and so on.
Yeah, so let's put this another way. What happens if I'm on premium and I change all my types? I change epic to feature, I change issue to story, and then I leave task as a task. And then I downgrade to free. What happens?
The relationships will be hidden. So the child item, at least in an epic, that would not show the child items.
There's no notion of an epic though anymore, or there shouldn't be. From like a code perspective, there's like work item types and they are whatever they are, but anything that says like this is an epic in the code shouldn't say if this is an epic. It should just say this is a work item.
Yeah, I think what will happen, and a lot of it may not just work, but I think what will happen or what basically should happen is is you'll keep your whatever work item types you've defined, but you can no longer add any new, or you cannot change them, you cannot customize, right? So you basically inherit whatever you used to have, but you no longer can do anything on top of that. Does that make sense? And
Yeah.
like if you've like, because your database already contains that data, it's a bit more difficult, and maybe it's possible. I'm just saying from my first understanding of it, it's a bit more difficult to start now saying, oh, was this is this maybe there is an easy way to say if this is a custom type or not a custom type, and we can filter that out even in free. But like the easiest thing is like, okay, we are reading whatever you have in the database, but you cannot create anything new, you cannot add anything new, you cannot customize because you're now on a free tier, so you don't have, like, your permissions will not allow you to do that, right? That's one level. You can probably go a couple levels more restrictive than that, but I'm not sure how much that adds into complexity and performance and all that.
What
Yeah.
happens when a customer is on Ultimate, creates epics, and then goes to free? Shouldn't it be the same behavior?
The epics are not shown when
Right. Don't
when
we
you
hide
go to
it?
free.
So I
Yeah.
would expect you to
Yes,
hide all
but
that
because
custom stuff.
yes, because that's Amanda, yes, exactly, but that's because we are filtering by type specifically currently, but we want to move away from that, right? So that's the big question. We are currently, that's happening, like they will not see epics because we know that the epic is a its own object, right? It's its own yeah, basically its own entity. But as we want to move away from a specific entity type and define it more onto the widgets, that will not be as a generic possibility anymore.
It would
So
be the side effect. Sorry, that you see the list of epics, but you click on them and you don't see the widgets that make the epic paid. So you won't see the child
Yeah.
items, you won't see all the other widgets that we consider premium or ultimate.
Eugenia, question. If we allow the creation of these minimal epics for free, could we restrict the ability to create relationships? Could we say,
Yes.
hey, you can have all the flat objects you want, epic, issue, task, call it whatever you want, but in free, you don't get to make an epic issue relationship.
That would be required. That would be one of the required for this to work, because to make the epic flat, and we need to move the restriction to the hierarchy, which is possible.
well, then I guess what's the point of having an epic and free? Like there's no value.
Right.
Yeah, that's the
At
big
that
question.
point,
It's
I
technically
feel
an
like
issue.
if it's an epic, if it's called an epic record and it lives everywhere because now they live everywhere, and we pulled off anything that could be of value, which I don't even know if you need to do it at that point, because if you can't make a relationship with the epic, it's literally an issue. So we're not really
it's
giving
essentially
free
an issue.
anything new, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, Gabe, with that framing, I think I'm okay with it. As long as you can't link, you can't do any related to blocked by blocking, and you can't do any children, and you can't, I think I'm okay with
it would become an issue technically, yeah. And
What
it
about
would be
then
shown.
roadmaps? They get roadmap. Could you ensure that they don't get roadmaps?
Well, I guess I'm saying we're just adding a useless thing in free, which is not like, and like from a usability standpoint, I know they don't make money, but we want people to up tier, and I don't know, it just seems like it's a bad user
I
experience.
don't know that it's useless. I think we could capitalize on it and throw some messaging in it to tell them what it could be as an advertisement to upgrade. You want to make a relationship? You want to make this apparent? I mean, I get where you're coming from, but if it will significantly improve our ability to move faster or be more scalable or improve our performance, I would be okay with the trade-off.
Is there a way to do like a default work item type license tied to a license check type thing? So you basically say for if it's free, the default work item types are X, Y, and Z. For premium, it's X, Y, and Z and D, and then for ultimate, it's like everything, including requirements. So that way, we're not like doing a type check necessarily. We're just saying here's what your free is going to be configured with, right? Your default types, and then If you're in premium or above, then you can customize your work item types, right?
Because the same applies to key results and objectives. They're also being checked now. The difference is that these are lists somewhere else. So we're basically just listing them. But if we wanted a list that would include also objectives and key results, all the types without caring, maybe when we have custom types, that's when this problem will apply. The same for groups as well. Once we have issues in groups, are we gonna have to hide the epics that we're not hiding now because we only display in epics? So yeah, an alternative maybe is having a type that includes all the types that are paid and hiding all of those. But then we wouldn't have different tiers. So that's another complication.
And with the consolidated list, we are anyways moving to a path where creating a work item is in itself an action, where user's selection would just be the type. So if the concern here is that we are adding a type in a free tier, knowing that it doesn't do much, we can still gate the creation itself for that particular type, and that way it won't show up on UI. Like users will still not be able to create epics in a premium, except that from the implementation point of view in the backend, we would still be not using type as a way to check the license availability. So that simplifies the backend implementation first, and on the front end, we would still be gating the creation itself behind the license.
Oh, so that's fine. If they don't show up for free users at all, then that solves my usability concern.
Well, let's
So
give
how
Vlad.
would we how would
Sorry, Alexander, real quick. Vlad has a great question that he's been sitting on because he typed in the agenda.
Oh, good for you.
No, I'm not sure if the question is good. Just not to forget, how will it work in the API if we're
Well,
not hiding it?
Yeah, that's why I think it's relevant, because if we're providing it in the API, but we're hiding it in the UI, that's a strange experience.
For the listing, it will be hidden also in the API because we use the same method using the finder. So the problematic is when the finder, we add a new filter by type by default. So we need to check every work item that we return, check the type. And if it's an epic, in this case, we remove it from the collection. That's what is more expensive. But it would be the same. The only difference, if like what I understand, right, what Kushal says, is if they're not able to create the epics in free, they will not show. So they will
how
not
can
see.
we so like in order to restrict creating the epics in free, you need to check the type anyway.
But
we
only
want
when
to move away
creating.
from that. Yeah, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
We either move away from checking the type in the code altogether, or we define like maybe what Gabe's suggesting is in that we have the default types, and the default types are hard coded by some, I don't know, enum value or whatever, right? So if it's a default type, we can say, is it allowed in license XYZ, whatever, right? So we can do a mapping for the default types. If it's a custom type, it should always go into Premium Plus. So then that way we can basically continue to use the type checks, but only the type checks in case if it's a default type. That's basically what I'm understanding. Because otherwise we'll start having these, oh, we don't check type, but we only check type when we create, and we only check type in API, and then we only check type in some other place, and then you're basically checking type anyway everywhere. So then we're better off just defining differentiating between default types and whatever comes as customized needs to go under license. And then whenever someone downgrades, you downgrade them to the default types. Like when they get into free, you downgrade them to the default types and restrict anything related to not being default types, basically. At least that seems like generic enough and a bit more set in stone kind of rule rather than having a lot of exceptions to the rule.
Yeah, I
What
think
do you
we can
think?
perhaps like take this conversation async on, at least from the engineering point of view, what we can do where creation can be gated without getting into type specific checks. If we figure that out, then I think product is on board that if we don't allow creating an object that isn't technically fully supported on a certain license, then it's not a problem how that object lives within the implementation, right?
Yeah, I just think that it may be more basically error prone, and we would have a bit more regressions that way because we have the specific checks on specific actions, and then it's only creation, but then we create, for instance, work items from the vulnerability. Oh, we forgot to check that one, and things like that. So I don't know.
I mean, I don't mind
But
creating that issue and start the conversation async, because it would require a lot of engineering input as well. Or yeah, maybe Eugenia can also draft
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I will create this issue.
Yep.
Thanks everyone for the input.
And
Yep.
I just want to say that was a really great example of a discussion to talk about in this kind of cross-stage, cross-team environment. So thank you very much for kicking us off, Eugenia. We have 3 minutes left, and a big topic that I put in number 2. I don't think there's a quick answer, so maybe it's just better to kick it off and have folks think about it. But we're becoming increasingly more bottlenecked by the release of the new work items powered views. And there's been discussion about investing in legacy views. I really want to avoid that. So I'm hoping maybe somebody can come up with some creative suggestions, because the only thing we've come up with is like, stop what you're doing and put everybody on it, which is not an effective plan either. So if anybody has ideas of how can we get things like filtering for custom fields and status and availability for project level epics and epic milestones, the terminology in the system, like just ideas to get this moving for faster. Yeah.
Have we considered asking for more resources, because we are on the top 5 as a tier 2 thing and people borrow our resources all the time to meet things on important deadlines? Is this an instance where, from an engineering perspective, we could ask for more help to be allocated?
I'd say what Steve wants us to do is hit our goals, and if we can't hit our goals in the public roadmap, to tell him what we need in order to do that. So that's where like it's a very valid ask. They might say no, but if we don't make that case and then we don't ship, then it's sort of like looks bad, because it's like, hey, you didn't say anything, you didn't ask for
Agreed.
anything.
Is that an ask of Steve or an ask of Tim?
Both.
Maybe.
Okay, so how do we coordinate at least that? And before we go there, would bringing resources in now actually help us hit the existing targets? It seems to me that the existing target dates are the problem, not necessarily the headcount, or maybe both. Because if you bring somebody in now, just to get them onboarded to start contributing, it's going to slow everybody else down, and those folks aren't going to be productive for a couple of milestones.
well,
like the
I
idea.
guess people on board should rather focus on breaking down these blockers into tasks that can be picked up by external contributors, so to say, right? Even from other teams or whatnot. So I'm not very up to date. Like this feels a lot like, well, a lot of this seems to be front end, but I'm not sure. Probably not. Like custom fields and custom status is not. But anyway, having a breakdown of everything to as much detail or as much task as possible, that would help parallelize and distribute that work basically. And I don't know, probably on custom status is Mark probably is most the one with the most knowledge into that, what needs to be or can be broken down. Sorry.
Yeah, let me just clarify. It's not to help ship those things faster, it's to ship the bottlenecks faster. So for example, the work items powered listing page at the group level has a list of like 22 items already defined, which include bulk editing and export and filtering and sorting. So it's that kind of stuff that the feature might be complete, like Mark can ship custom status, but he can't make it GA because you can't filter it on a list. You can't filter it on a board, right? So it's all of the kind of supporting things. So epic milestones can be released, but it can't be released because you can't see it, you can't filter it on a list, or you can't see it on a board, right?
I see. Okay.
Just in general, I kind of feel like the big problem that we're having is coordination between too many engineers. So adding more engineers may make it worse, not better. And as Amanda said, yeah, it's you need the onboarding period, learning, and then like you add in more and more communication lines. So yeah, like I'm not on the teams responsible for this, but I would either ask for the different deadlines, or I don't know, if we have something else to push back and not focus on it, do it ourselves.
Well, but the bottlenecks are then functionality tied, and for instance, for a milestone, I understand that it doesn't bring to like enough value without having it in filtering, but that was not there, so not having it in filters should not be like from my perspective. I'm not a UX. I'm not going to take responsibility for saying that, for like having a decision on that. But it feels like because it's a new thing, it should not be a blocker to not release milestone on the Epic because it doesn't have filter. I understand it's not a full feature, and we strive to go more towards that, but that should not be, I think, considered a bottleneck. Similar for custom, like everything that's new being added, that should not be a bottleneck to release because it doesn't remove any of the existing functionality, so it doesn't create a blocker from my perspective. Again, I don't know.
Alexandra, we have been sitting on Epic assignees for 8 months, and I said the same thing 8 months ago. We didn't have Epic assignees before. Let's give them Epic assignees. But the feedback that I've received and I understand is that if you give them the thing, but they can't do anything with it, how is that any better? And so I understand it from that perspective. So we stick it on the detail page, but you can't retrieve it anywhere. What does that do for you, right? There's a single limited use case that it solves, and then all these other ones that actually make it useful.
Yeah, so I bet, I mean, then we should get someone on it and spend some time to put in together some sort of a guideline or whatever, the roadmap of adding a new feature and what does it need to have to fully get it out, right? Like, because a lot of this stuff is not obvious maybe to everyone, like even me being a long time here, it's not exactly obvious what are the requirements for the, like, okay, filtering seems okay, but then what goes into, should it go into roadmap, should it go into boards, which one we do touch, which one we don't touch. So having kind of a breakdown to understand what, and then you can have a better understanding, a better estimate, and then give better estimations to when that will be accomplished, because it needs to go through this and that, and only then can you consider that a feature complete, so to say, and or definition of done and so on.
I totally agree. We've been bad at that. We've been really bad at saying like we want to ship this thing, but like not narrowly, like not defining the scope ahead of time, or like the definition of done ahead of time. Even to the on the retro Anastasia's point about just the spike, you don't even know what's the scope, right? So I think we have to do that, and that would have helped us out in the situation, but we're still in the situation. So I don't know. We're over time. Go ahead, dude.
I was just gonna say, didn't you? I reviewed a merge request from you that had a definition of done for adding a widget or something.
Yeah,
Whatever happened with that?
I forgot about it. I'll bring it back to life.
Was the definition of ready for work?
Well, so I don't know. The thing I made was a definition of done for work items, for contributing to work items. So slightly different.
Or like adding a new widget, I think is what it was.
Yeah, adding a new widget, exactly. Eugenia, did you want to say something?
Yes. I'm not sure if I can identify exactly what the bottleneck is, but maybe if we have better visibility and maybe the separated by backend, front end. My impression about the listing work, at least when I looked at it for Epic project level, was that most of it was front end. But if that's not the case, maybe what we need is better visibility. Because, for example, in this month, I'm working a lot on the design management part, and I'm not sure if that's priority. I don't even know if that's included in the roadmap. So I might be putting my time there when there's something else that I could be unblocking. So if that's the case, maybe it would be good to bring the team together and see, can we maybe redirect priorities?
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. And you know what, our entire roadmap, like at least for product planning, or actually both groups, the entire roadmap is dependent upon everything before. And so design management is important because it's for group level issues. But group level issues are less important than custom fields and custom status. So technically, burning down that back end list of the work items parity I put in the agenda would be more helpful. But if we push design management, then that pushes group issues to not make it on time. So it's kind of like, it's all bad. And that comes back to the capacity constraint. So maybe more, I don't know.
Well, I know the last thing that we can drop is that, yes, we have to have group issues done by beginning of July, but we have to have the work item list done before we can do group issues too. And it's so sort of like blocking everything.
Yeah.
So it's like if we can focus on the work items list and then get that to a state where it's like not blocking everyone, and then switch back to group issues, and we still feel like we can get group issues done, which includes design management. That's a great decision, in my opinion.
Yeah, project epics are also blocked by listing. So
yeah.
Yep.
So what would help from an engineering perspective if I think we know the priorities, we know the product priorities, they're listed on the roadmap in order. So we need project coordination to say, okay, well, to get the first thing out, here's the list of blockers. To get the second thing out, here's the list of blockers, right? And then we should make sure that we are either swarming or assigned on the first things first. Gabe, is this something that you could bring to the engineering managers?
I sure can.
Awesome. You're killing me with that.
Yeah, like for widgets, I wonder if we can do a lot more mocking, so to say, and develop, because otherwise this will always be bottlenecked because it's so interconnected. Everything, like adding a widget is so interconnecting with a lot of functionality in plan in general, right? Like filtering, sorting, grouping, boards, whatnot. So it'll always, like whenever you want to add a new functionality, it'll always be like that, like what we have today. We will always have this problem where you need to time it correctly, sequence it correctly, and so on and so forth. So we need to think of some ways to template it and maybe let people work in parallel with some mocking, with some right static data before we then in the end tie it all together. Because otherwise, like front end wasting cycles to wait on the back end to be implemented, and then tying it together and then coming back to the back end that something is not done, not good enough, which will happen anyway, but at least some of the tracks maybe can be worked in together.
So like right now, the way I understand it, let's say we add a new widget, right? We add do the database migration, get it to show up on the detail view, then we go update the filter bars, let's pull that in, update everywhere that we want to expose it. Is there a way to like put that behavior, I guess, on the widget or object itself? So like you basically say it's filterable, it's searchable, or whatever they are, and then we're dynamically pulling all that stuff into the front, like basically the other places, instead of explicitly going and updating all of those. We're basically saying, let's go search and find all the widgets that have these behavior attributes that then should show up in the filter bar, that should show up. And so we're not having to go update everything. We just update the core thing, basically.
Yeah, I don't think that's possible today. But I see where you're coming from. And yeah, that will be more data driven in that you'll have somewhere in the database specified, okay, this should go into also filtering and grouping and whatnot. And then front end can make the requests to the back end and see, okay, these are the things that I need to display in the left sidebar, and these are the things that I need to display in the filtering and so on. But yeah, no,
We're gonna have to
that's
do
not.
that like that anyways with custom fields, and right, because we're not gonna know what the field names are, so we're gonna have to like query the database anyways to get the field names and then the field values that you can filter on. So it's almost like the same thing of taking that approach of making it more database driven, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I guess we just didn't get to that. We are dragging a lot of the legacy stuff, and we're working through a lot of this migration well, code migrating from legacy into the new one. But yeah, eventually, especially with as we get into developing the saved views, I think that'll go into kind of a similar fashion as well, because you'll need to query and know when you're building the saved views, right? Which columns to or which fields to use and which columns to display, like the table view and so on and so forth. So I guess eventually we'll get there, but we're not yet there.
All right, I'm
Yep.
going to call this meeting because I respect your time and we already went way over. I'm very sorry. Really great discussion, though. Please follow up if you have any other ideas. The only action item we have is for Eugenia to create an issue or comment on an existing issue to discuss further the license check. And Gabe to talk about the dependencies with the EMs, dependencies of the near-term priorities.
Yep.
Okay,
Do that
thanks
today.
everybody. I'll add this recording to the agenda. Okay, bye.